Okay. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much, first of all, for joining us today. I am pleased to welcome you all to this event organized by Forest Valley Institute and 51 to Carbon Zero as part of the Milano Digital Week. So, the goal of this session is to explore the complex relationship between digitalization and the sustainable transition. So over the next hour, we'll explore how digital technologies position themselves in the broader context of climate change in a time when rising emissions present one of the greatest challenges of our times. So we'll be tackling both about the we'll be tackling about the sorry, we'll be tackling both the challenges and the opportunities posed by these technologies and asking how do we strike a balance? So we'll try to answer this question, how do we balance impact and opportunities? So there will be time for Q&A at the end, so please feel free to raise your hand. And before we dive in, so let's introduce our speakers. We have Paolo Meola, co-founder and CEO at Forest Valley Institute. Hi, Paolo.
Hi, everybody.
Forest Valley Institute is a non-profit organization dedicated to fighting climate change from the supply chain side by promoting innovation and connecting B2B climate startups with companies. And then we have two guests from 51 Carbon Zero, which is a B2B company offering a software as a service that helps media, advertising, and marketing companies to track and reduce their emissions. So a huge welcome to Richard Davis, co-founder and CEO. Hi, Richard.
Hello, everyone. Ciao a tutti.
And Chloe Hopper, climate success analyst. Welcome, Chloe.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so when we talk about reducing CO2 emissions, digitalization is something which is often overlooked, but the reality is quite different. It has a significant impact on emissions, and what's more, it's growing fast. Let's hear now from Richard and Chloe to shed more light on this. So Richard and Chloe, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Noemi, and lovely to be here. Thank you for the invite, and thank you for everyone joining online. So what Chloe and I will do in this first part of the session is to give you a bit of a high-level view of the problem, the issue we're trying to tackle here, which is climate change, how carbon emissions from digital activities actually contributed to the challenge, but also offer an opportunity. And then with Paolo, of course, we'll go into actually how does this look in real life with some examples. So if we move on to the first slide, just wanted to start with a little bit of a teaser about also our name as a company, 51 to Carbon Zero. It's a bit of a long name. It's the mix of numbers and letters, and from a marketing point of view, probably not the best choice ever. However, there's an important message in that name, a message which is all about the topic we're tackling today. It's about the 51 billion tons of greenhouse gas that we push into the atmosphere on average every year, and the need to get down to zero or net zero as fast, as quick as possible. So is 51 billion tons like a big number or a small number? Because it's difficult to touch it and understand it. So let's put that a bit in perspective over time. So the green line that you see here on the slide is how that 51 billion tons, or how that number has been growing steadily and quickly, unfortunately, up to 51 billion tons. So is it a big number? Yes, it's a big number if we compare it to what it used to be in the past. And then if you look at the white line here, you look at the rising temperatures, global temperatures in our lovely planet. And you can see that the two are going in the same direction. And there is, of course, wide scientific consensus that human-made carbon emissions are driving global temperatures up. So if that's happening, if that's real, and that's happening now, let's have a look a little bit more about where the 51 billion tons come from. And I'll let Chloe walk you through this.
Thank you, Richard. So, yeah, as Richard said, leading on from the fact that we know emissions are rising, so to understand how we can most effectively reduce these emissions, we need to first understand where they're coming from. So this graph is published by the World Resources Institute, who are a leading global research organization, and they specialize in environmental sustainability and climate change. So it's a really important source. And this graph breaks down the global emissions. And you can see that energy contributes roughly 75% to total global emissions, which is a really significant amount. The question really we're trying to discuss today is, where does digital technology fit into this graph? We would say that the majority of emissions from digital tech will come from this energy section. So powering all of our tech, data centers which use energy, and then the manufacturing plants. But how much do these emissions from digital technology actually contribute? What percentage do they contribute? We likely all know that the aviation industry, so flights across the world, are often referenced as being extremely bad for the environment with a huge carbon footprint. And they contribute 1.9% to global emissions. But when we compare that figure to the digital technology number, we can see that digital technology contributes 3.7% to global emissions, which is roughly double the amount of the whole aviation industry. So it's really important to take seriously and think about how we can reduce the footprint of digital tech and be more sustainable. If we unpack that 3% a little bit, 3.7% a little bit further, we can see that there are 4 core categories where emissions come from. So tech production itself, so that's like the manufacturing of the product, consumers, you and I using the product at home, using the digital tech, data centers, which power a lot of our digital lives, and then networks, so things like the internet. All of these areas are really important to work on and being more sustainable, but it's data centers in particular that we're going to talk about, particularly because they're a huge area of interest because their emissions are growing at an extremely fast rate. In this graph, we can see that significant growth rate in terms of energy demand from data centers, where it's predicted to grow 2.5 times between 2024 and 2030. So it's really important to consider how we can be more sustainable in this area. And I'm going to hand over to Richard, who will talk a little bit more about why data centers are predicted to increase their energy demand.
So a key driving force behind that increase in emissions from data center is AI, so artificial intelligence. So all the computational power which is required to run large language models and data processing to run a ChatGPT query is absolutely exploding and augmenting those emissions. When you will receive the materials from the session, you will find in this slide a link to a YouTube video. It's a 15 minutes documentary from CNBC. It really unpacks well how in the US, especially as an example of what's happening globally, data centers are sucking out power out of the grid, leaving households without energy at peak times, which blows my mind. If we go on to the next slide, just to give you an example, we already use a lot of tech, a lot of digital technologies in our lives. We have been using Google to ask everything about what we need for the last 20 or so years. We are now moving to ask more of the same questions to ChatGPT or other type of chat boxes. Well, a query on ChatGPT consumes 10 times more energy than a query on Google, than a search on Google. So think about all of a sudden we are multiplying by 10 our daily, part of our daily activity, part of our daily digital lives. And I think I've seen another stat which says that one query on OpenAI is essentially like having a LED bulb being lit on for an hour. So that's a lot of hours and a lot of lights going off. So if we look at the end result of this, onto the next slide, is that emissions from players who are heavily reliant on AI are increasing. So you got here a couple of examples from Google and Microsoft. Both of them, of course, rely increasingly more on AI. And AI, by the way, is not just, again, ChatGPT asking a question. The fact that Google Maps are working better and better every month is because the AI models behind it are improving and expanding. So you see Google, you see Microsoft tripling or increasing by almost 50% their carbon emissions, despite all their promises and their good intentions, I'm sure, to get to net zero. So for companies like this, which have been almost champions of the net zero conversation so far, to all of a sudden have such a big carbon emission problem so core to their business model is an issue. Within this, onto the next slide, one area which is often overlooked is digital advertising and how that contributes to the almost 4% of carbon emissions that we have seen earlier on. So digital advertising campaigns run along quite a complex supply chain of different technologies talking to each other to find the right customer or the right audience to serve an ad to. So this is just an example from a research company called 55, not 51 like us, but similar. A digital advertising campaign, global digital advertising campaign, so we're talking about medium to large scale, is like going back and forth between Paris and New York 160 times on a plane. That is quite a lot. So there are different estimates of how much of the 4% of digital emissions come from advertising and digital advertising. I would say between 1.5% realistically is from this part of the value chain. So it's quite significant. So we talked about the challenge, the issue that we are facing. At the same time, there's another side, like the other side of the coin, if you will, which is there's a lot of innovation within technology and digital technology specifically, which makes us very hopeful about the possibility to tackle and solve the challenge. So processors, for example, are improving month over month. ARM just released new CPUs or GPUs that improve emissions, not emissions, but power consumption at data centers by 15%. And those numbers will just improve and increase. If you think about solar energy 20 years ago, well, say 30 years ago, it was unthinkable that it would be affordable and available. 20, 15 years ago, it was hard to think it would be financially viable. Today, the cost of solar energy is absolutely widely, there's a low marginal cost. It can be absolutely implemented globally. So the same, hopefully, will happen also with digital technologies and data centers. The question is how quickly, and can we wait for that time to happen, or do we need to do something in the meantime? And of course, our view is that we need to do something in the meantime, and we'll go through that in a sec. On to another example, talked about efficiency in data centers and the usage of the digital technology. Also fair to say that digitalization can dematerialize and hence decarbonize large parts of the economy. So for example, think of traditional offline shopping versus online e-commerce shopping. So different studies out there, but I think this is a good one to as a reference, showing like offline shopping is 2.3 times more carbon intensive than online shopping for a number of reasons. You see the two bar chart graphs here, the right-hand side offline, on the left-hand side online, so digital. On the right-hand side, you see a big chunk is green. That is people going to the store, essentially. That doesn't happen, of course, with online shopping. A large chunk, again, is the blue segment. That is powering, heating, or cooling down the buildings, the physical retail stores. That doesn't happen, obviously, with online shopping, where you have to power distribution centers, which are less energy hungry than shops where people go and spend some time to live a real experience. So there are like two sides of the coin, as we said. I think let's look at how this happens and how this could, the bright side of the conversation, how this lands into real industries. And I'll pass it back to Chloe to talk about this.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. So as he said, we've got some more examples of how AI can be really helpful in industries and can actually reduce emissions. So we've kind of discussed how AI can be bad, it increases emissions at data centers, but there is kind of a fine line and a balance. So some examples of how AI can be really helpful for certain industries is the industry sector, the manufacturing sector, and the supply chain. AI can really be helpful in tracking products, optimizing tracking, which allow people to reduce waste. They're not losing items in their supply chain. It's also great for building energy management, helping to optimize energy distribution, manage supply and demand so that it's the most efficient when it can be. AI has also been really great in the transportation sector, analyzing traffic and also increasing sort of like traffic management systems so that people can get where they need to go earlier. And all these things are great ways of using AI that have helped reduce emissions. So AI is great. We don't want to get rid of it. I think the key question really is how can we use these digital technologies in a more responsible way, in a more sustainable way? Again, we've seen how they can increase emissions, but in conjunction with that, we've also seen how valuable digitization can be and how it can reduce emissions. So it's quite a fine balance. In terms of change and moving to more sustainable digital technology, we believe it's got these kind of like three pillars. It's going to come from individuals, businesses, institutions, and we've all got to make changes to our practices. And what we kind of want to leave you with before we move to Paolo's presentation is just some points to think about in regards to what can you and I do as individuals to use digital technology in a more responsible and sustainable way. So we've just got a short list here, but it's just some small steps that if we put out into like a global population scale will and can make a big difference. And I think also starting small in these small steps can encourage more sustainable behavior and growth in your sustainable behaviors online. So we've got things like using power saving settings, recycling your old electronics, pairing them. And what I really like is digital minimalism and unsubscribing to things, because I think like we do a physical spring clean, there are lots of things we store in the cloud or within our phones that are using energy and lead to increased emissions without us needing those things that we're storing. And it's about us as individuals sort of making that bridge between our digital lives and how they directly contribute to the energy increase in the digital technology space. So hopefully we can all start being more responsible in our digital lives. We're taking the steps to be, but thank you for listening and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard and Chloe, for setting the stage for today's discussion. And now let's go more in depth about how digitalization can be harnessed in the service of sustainability. Paolo, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Richard and Chloe, for starting the presentation. I mean, it's been very, very useful, very interesting, and it also sets the perfect ground for me to showcase some of the technologies that we see as Forest Valley. Before I start talking about the technologies, I'd love to talk just 1 second about Forest Valley, just to make you understand what is our approach, what is our vision to climate innovation, and why we think that digitalization can help in this path. So let me share the screen. Can you see it? Yep. So first of all, Forest Valley is a nonprofit organization that I co-founded together with other founders of this organization about 4 years ago, with the idea that we could solve the problem from an industrial perspective. So when we say that that we're generating 51, and while we're talking, it's already 52 and 53 billion, maybe 54 billion tons of CO2 and CO2 equivalent in the atmosphere. Well, the idea was like that 50 something billions is produced by us producing services and goods that then we consume. So the overall idea was to find technologies that are able to, given the same level of production, to reduce the amount of energy, the amount of material, the amount of waste that we produce. And so the idea is to solve the problem from an industrial perspective by matchmaking the corporations that are producing these goods and services with startups, with technologies that are basically speeding up the transition. Because in our opinion, the only way of solving the problem is through a technology leap. So we need to speed up the technology, just like it's been done in the solar sector, for example, that in the last 30 years reduced by 95% the cost of solar panels and then the production of solar energy. So given that within the last 4 years we tried to create a huge ecosystem of players, some of which are startups, most of which are investors and corporations, so that we are able to get trends. So what we do is we talk with the corporations to understand the reasons why they're to understand their friction in the climate transition, and then we go out and scout for technologies. Until now, we've helped 72 startups from all over Europe, speeding up the technology adoption of the technologies they produce. So we've seen many technologies right now. Today we're at the batch 10th of our program, our acceleration program. So we just touch point 80 startups from all over Europe, and all these startups somehow are trying to reduce and trying to decarbonize one specific industry or one specific process within an industry. And so this gives us, I'd say, a privileged point of view, because we can see on the one hand the needs of the corporations while they try to reduce their impact, and on the other hand we can see the cutting edge technologies, the technologies that are being developed, and that will be the solution to our problems in the future. So I'd say that we are at least 1 or 2 years ahead of what is going to happen. And based on that, and as you see, we have technologies in many different areas. Chloe was showing that a huge percentage of, apart from energy, a huge percentage of the carbon emissions are due to the food industry. And indeed, if you see here, we have companies in alternative proteins, but also companies in the food chain sustainability. But then, as you see later on, we have many in these fields. But let me go back to the trends in digitalization for climate. Usually, what we do, we have startups that are hardware startups. So bare metal stuff, machinery, so technologies that are not only software based. But as you see later on, I'd say that 100% of those technologies are in need of data to be applied. So the first step toward the decarbonization of most of the processes we have in place is the measuring side, so the digitization of the industrial processes, and then there's some kind of optimization. I'd love to start from why we think that it is super relevant for us to decarbonize, to use this digitization to decarbonize the industry. Indeed, we think that there are 3 main points. The first is operational efficiency. So as I was saying, the fact that you're able to track those technologies allow us to then minimize, to work in real time, to minimize the emissions, to minimize the effort the machines have to make in order to produce services and goods, and so on and so forth. Secondly, when we say that any industry is producing a certain amount of CO2 or is impacting a certain way on the climate, we're not talking about what is happening within the plant. Most of the time, we're talking about what is happening within the plant, plus what is happening within the chain, the energy chain, because they are most likely to use, they're most likely be using some energy to then move the machines or heat up the ovens that are then used to produce the services and goods. For example, we work a lot in the one of our partners is a company in the ceramic industry, Italcer, probably the biggest in Italy, and they have a huge climate impact dependent on the fact that in order to produce ceramic, you need to bake it in ovens that reach up to 1,200 degrees Celsius degrees. So part of the problem is, of course, in that case, the energy supply. But then there are other industries in which like 90% of the impact is due to the supply chain. Just think about the fashion industry, in which most likely the company that is selling the clothes is not probably producing them. It's just selling. Is just commercializing the product that is produced somewhere else. And for example, if you look at this T-shirt that a company sold to me, was produced in another country using a textile that was produced in another country, that was colored in another country, using cotton that was grown in another country. So if you're not able to track the entire supply chain, you're not able to track the entire chain, the entire CO2 production chain, let's say, but also you're not able to make decisions about the chain. So if you want to change, if you want to reduce the impact, and 90% of the impact is in the upstream, you have to know what is happening before what is happening before the material get to your plant, and then you work on them. So being able to monitor what is happening at each step of the supply chain is right now, for most of the industry, super necessary. Then third point, and we will see that later on, data-driven decision-making and automated decision-making. So every time we have data, and this is the basics of AI, every time we talk about AI and the fact that we're using AI to solve any problem, we're just saying that we use a ton of data gathered somewhere. We trained some kind of artificial intelligence, and that intelligence made some smart decision using that data. So on the one hand, you need to collect data, and I was talking about that earlier. On the other hand, you use that data to make decisions. For example, there's an entire industry, entire field in the manufacturing optimization that is called the switch on and off technologies. So technologies that are meant to like switch off your machines when they're not needed, or switch off the heating system when it's not needed, or switch off the lighting. And that kind of stuff can only be done if you have the data. So this is why digitizing, we believe that a huge part of any efficiency we can make at any level of this climate transition path is deeply connected to the digitization of any industry. Let's now have a look into some of the trends we were able to see within our studies, within our collection of data from startups and corporations. First of all, there's a huge trend connected to IoT and the smart factory systems. I was talking about that. Indeed, digitizing all the process enables to, and digitizing, for example, all the monitoring. You will see later on, I will show you a couple of cases in which the collecting data in real time is able to prevent, for example, downtime, the machine downtime. What is downtime? Every time you have your machinery that is that stops for any reason, like any anomaly. And if it does, you have to basically you wasted the entire production, and also you're wasting a lot of energy. So if you're able to prevent the downtime, you're able to save products, save raw material, and also save energy. Then the AI for production optimization. There's a lot of there's a huge trend connected to making products that are more sustainable, and this is connected to the material. Or I was talking about the digital twins. It's a huge part, a huge trend we can see is basically creating another digital entity that is somehow replicating the the entities that are there in the production system, and that allows you, for example, to do real-time simulations and optimizations. So you don't have to like manually work and see what happens. You can do all the predictions within within a computer algorithm and then apply them in real time in your production system. Well, let me show you a different industry, that a different kind of trend, that is the energy efficiency and IT infrastructure. I mean, we were talking about that earlier. First of all, there's a huge. I just gave you the an example in the ceramic industry. That industry is very energy consuming, and so if it is that energy consuming, most likely you'll be using is most likely you have installed some solar panels, but as you know, those panels are not do not provide continuous electricity flow, because they're dependent on the solar on the presence of the sun. Or the same happens if you have wind turbines. If there's no wind, you have no energy. So there's a huge space connected to the energy storage sector, and you have to optimize the energy storage sector so that when you have more energy than you need, you can store it, and then or maybe you can share it. So there's a huge trend connected to optimizing the usage, the storage, the sharing of energy. Also, there's a huge trend in the energy efficiency. So in the energy efficiency of the production itself. So optimizing the processes so that we can use less energy. And then we were talking, of course, about the anything that is related to cloud computing, and Chloe and Richard were already talked about that, so I'm not spending much time on that. Then I was talking about supply chain transparency, sustainability. For example, I've seen a huge growth of blockchain related technologies. Also, I mean, I think that the traceability of the supply chain is probably one of the few real life application of the blockchain, at least in my personal experience. I've seen that, of course, the notarization is another one, but like being able to certify and to certify each step of the process, or a supply chain, or the of any production of any production supply chain, is very powerful, and it also allows you to I mean, being transparent to the world about your efforts and about actual impact of your production. Also, please do remember that in the next few years, the European regulation will make it necessary for most industries, to create a digital product passport. So allow the consumer to be able to have a look into the entire itinerary, from the raw material to the end product, so they know, all the steps that were that led to the end product. And without the blockchain, this thing is pretty complex. Also, I mean, European regulation is pushing a lot toward the reporting and carbon footprint tracking. And that stuff is pretty complex and time consuming. So I've seen a lot of work in accelerating these activities by automatizing them mostly. So collecting data from APIs, collecting data from your ERP and so on and so forth, and then automatically producing, also using, for example, generative AI, the reports, because otherwise it would be a huge work that, I mean, companies have to do. There's the CSRD regulation that is was just approved, and in a couple of years, many companies. So I'm not giving you the criteria, but many companies over certain revenues amount, or a certain level of revenues, or a certain number of employees will need to report, will be asked to report their emissions and their social activity.
Thank you so much, Paolo. You will have the chance to go more in depth into some practical examples from Forest Valley, but we have a very tough schedule.
Okay, I have to speed up. So the final one is the circular economy optimization. As I show you later, you will see many examples in which you could use, like you were able to track in your each step of your production. You're able then to see what part of your waste can be reused, and which that can be reused, and that you can give a new life to, for example, your waste. That happens, for example, in the fashion industry a lot. Let me show you some examples, just like Mimi was saying. We have a lot of relevant case studies, so we show you real companies we are working with. Let me start from this one. We're in the this one is in the optimization in the energy efficiency field. It's a Spanish company that is able to reduce by 20% the energy consumption of the refrigeration of any industrial refrigerator. Let me give you an example. I mean, this is a great example because we connected these guys with a company that is a food company, and they are using a lot of they have a lot of industrial refrigerators because they're freezing tuna basically. And the reason why they could not apply this technology was because the plant in which they were planning to have this technology tested didn't have the sensors that were needed to get the data and then to optimize the refrigerators. So in this case, this company that potentially was able to reduce the energy consumption of this food company, and that will also have meant a huge reduction in cost. Well, that could not be applied because those guys didn't have in place the industry 4.0 and industry 4.0 sensor, so they could not provide the data. So this is a real example of also why it's very relevant to track data. The same happens, for example, with this technology. This is another startup we have from Greece. This Greek company, once again, by collecting data and doing real-time optimization, is able to reduce up to 70% the energy consumption of heating and cooling. Or this company is using is a Portuguese company that is using IoT sensors within the hotel, in the hotellery, so within the hotels in the rooms, and is able to reduce up to 9% and up to 9%, as far as I remember, the amount of energy wasted for heating and the lighting within the rooms, but also up to 15% the water waste. Or I was talking about we were talking about the food sector. This is a Turkish Estonian company that is using, for example, satellite data to do what is called precision farming. What is precision farming? Is basically using data to make real-time predictions, but also real-time decision making. And in this case, you're able to detect anomalies before they are there, or they can tell you, hey, it's time to irrigate because the soil is dry, or it's time to put the fertilizer, and so on and so forth. In a case study we had, they basically closed a deal with a company with about, as far as I remember, it was 40K hectares or something like that, and they were able to reduce by 70% the use of fertilizer, and by, as far as I remember, 30 million liters per year of water, given the same level of yield production. So these kind of technologies can use AI and satellite data to basically cut in half your cost of production of food. And as Chloe was saying, I mean, we have a huge percentage of our carbon emissions that are coming from this industry. Or you have technologies like this one that are using
yeah, we will have the chance to go more in depth in these technologies, Paolo, but I think that maybe our audience might have some questions for few speakers, so maybe we'll see.
We have tons of examples.
So far I have actually a couple of questions for you, because we've just heard two very interesting sessions. So the first one focused on the impact of digital technologies, and the other one more focused on the opportunities coming from digitalization. In particular, Richard, so you mentioned the impact of advertising, which is something that often is overlooked. What specific steps can agencies or companies, or also digital platforms, take to minimize these emissions and also make their advertising practices more sustainable?
Sure. So first of all, Paolo, super interesting to see all these examples. I want 51 to carbon zero to be one of those examples very soon, so we'll talk about that. But it's so on the advertising side, it is often overlooked, yes. Just to give the context, between the advertiser, so the brand, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, you name it, and all of us, the consumers, there are many players that create, store, and distribute, and then display an advert on any screen. All these players have got carbon emissions. These carbon emissions are slightly different depending on where you are in the value chain. So you mentioned agencies, Noemi. Agencies, in a way, are the least carbon intensive. They offer professional services, so advisory, but they've got the most power because they kind of distribute and allocate the money of the advertiser to all the different publishers and technologies and people who are in the mix. So their key kind of action or initiative, apart from decarbonizing their offices and real estate, is really to change their procurement policies. So we are working with companies like Horizon Media, which is a large media agency in the US, or a global agency like MIQ, in looking how they can influence the value chain, because the value chain's emissions then is part of their emissions as well, as part of so-called Scope 3. So new ways of engaging, influencing, and then selecting at some point partners depending on what they're doing on net zero. When it comes to like hard tech decarbonization, so advertising technologies, those who serve the ads on our screen via real-time bidding and auction. So there's a lot of transactions happening behind the scenes that we don't realize. Those guys, well, they might run data centers or have data centers in co-location where they've got like the ability to do things like move to renewables. So for example, Papmatic is another client of ours, is a global NASDAQ listed advertising technology. They've moved all their data centers across the world to renewables, either directly or via like market schemes. They can look at how those data centers are managed, so you can do immersion cooling and other things to use less energy. If you're on the cloud, so you don't have direct control on those data centers, you can still look at which data centers your cloud provider is using. So for example, we work with a Spanish company called Tapex. They move their cloud emissions or the cloud suppliers from high-intensive power grids in Eastern Europe to less power-intensive power grids in Northern Europe, for example. So there are many things that can happen on that side. Just on a last concluding note, it becomes a bit more technical, but even the way that the publisher displays an advert on your screen, if, for example, if there's a video, the video could be set in play mode only when it's displayed on screen rather than when it's off screen. That saves energy and power on your consumer device. So there are like many things that become very, very deeply technical very quickly, but there's a lot that can be done.
Thank you. And in this respect, Paolo, you have a background as a digital entrepreneur. Indeed, you are a founder of a digital consulting agency before transitioning to climate-focused initiatives. How do you see sustainability being addressed in the tech and digital industries?
First of all, I was doing that like 4 years ago, so I hope that things have changed, but I don't think so. And as far as I know, they don't care. We didn't care, at least at the time. I mean, the only thing that we were caring about, because that is relevant also to reduce cost, is is basically saving energy on the back end, because I mean the machines have a cost. AWS or other cloud services provider are representing a huge cost, and so optimization on that side, so on the backend side, has always been super relevant because of performances, because of cost, and so on and so forth. So somehow there are some technical activities that every smart digital agency / software house is doing, because there are two main points in which like bad performances are affecting the results of those agencies. One is the cost on the server side. The second one is the loading speed of the page. And we know that every time the page loads too slowly, we are losing some conversion rate. So on that side, there's an interest, but the only reason why there's an interest is because it goes together with other goals that are digital agencies. Apart from that, at least on my side, we didn't care at all about saving carbon. We didn't care at all about saving energy, and there was no optimization in the checklist of the optimizations that may be connected to what Richard was saying. I hope that this has changed in the last few years, but I frankly doubt it. So I hope that Richard can, can tell me that things have changed. But I mean, as always, this happens even in other industries. Those things become relevant only when they affect financial performances.
Mm-hmm.
If they affect financial performance, then they become relevant. Otherwise, it's not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Richard, what's your perspective?
Yeah, so to Paolo's point, energy hungry business will see big bills being paid for electricity or even cooling down data centers. So I think there's a financial element which at some point will, well, it is hitting the bottom line. And if these big, large tech players don't think about it in some shape or form, it will start to be flagged to them by their investors. So I think there's in the end, the financial kind of angle will hopefully play in favor of what we're trying to solve. I don't know if you guys have seen the recent statements from Eric Schmidt, one of the co-founders of Google, just the other day, on his point about we should, AI versus climate in a way. Let's not slow down the development of AI because we got concerns about carbon emissions. So to your point, Paolo, to the other part of your argument, tech has got a dual view on this. They want to do something about it, but then they think AI is more important. Obviously, I don't think the same. I think they can both go hand in hand. Where they compete in reality, in my view, is on investment. So AI, I mean, one of the latest thing I've heard from Altman, I'm sure there are many like figures flying out there. Developing proper AI requires today 300 billion extra investment from either public or private sector. You can't invest 300 billion in a year in AI and have another 300 billion ready for climate tech or climate or energy efficiency. So I think the real competition between the two is in investment. I don't think there is enough money from those who have the money available to invest in both. So climate tech versus AI, I think, is an investment friction rather than a philosophical or operational, more importantly, friction. I think operationally, you want to consume less energy, which creates less carbon emissions, but financially, either you invest in one or the other. So that piece of the conversation makes me a bit nervous, you know, honestly, about what will happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah, in this respect, so in your opinion, of course, I'm addressing to Paolo, but both actually, how can companies strike this right balance between, on the one side, adopting AI for sustainability, and on the other side, also minimizing its environmental impact? So on the one side, with Paolo, who was showing us some compelling technologies from Forest Valley's portfolio, we were seeing the application of AI for sustainability. But on the other side, there's an impact. So how do we find the balance? There's a key. Do we still have to reach the solution?
It's very tough. I mean, first of all, I do agree with Richard as to the trade-off between like investment in AI or in climate or in, but like there are cycles. So a couple of years ago, the climate was in hype. Now AI is in hype. Then will be like cloud computing. Then will be like quantum computing. So those are cycles. As to the corporations. The point is AI, for example, is just a technology. So a company do not invest in AI. A company do invest in a solution to a problem. And indeed, the technology I showed you, I mean, they were AI applications. Some of them were AI applications. But when you sell to the company those technologies, you're not selling them the fact that is AI powered. You're selling them, hey, I'm making you save 20% of your energy bill, or I'm making you reduce by 20% your waste, your production waste, and so on and so forth. So the real point, in my opinion, is that companies are very slow in adopting anything. It's not adopting AI or adopting climate positive solution. The point is, in my opinion, that companies are slow in digitizing the processes. For example, we've seen a huge growth of, I mean, the speed of those companies digitizing their processes grew like crazy during COVID. Like companies I personally talked with in the previous 5 years. In 2020, called me, hey, we need to digitize the processes. I was like, yes, but I told you like 3 years ago, and it was not relevant. Why is it relevant now? So unluckily, we need COVIDs to speed up things. We need, yeah, I mean, we need huge problems. We need like once we starting having storms every couple of weeks, and that destroys our food production, then companies will speed up in the climate transition. So, in my opinion, onto like investing in climate or as to the corporation side, or investing in technology, there's no trade-off. The point is being willing to innovate, willing to invest. And right now, the point is the way our economy works and the way our organization work basically is preventing innovation. So I bet that also Richard is having tough times convincing companies to. I hope that they are right now like speeding up things, but I know that we are all having hard times convincing companies to adopt new technologies, to adopt new solutions, and that is where we have to work more on the cultural side, so that we're able to, I mean, to make the change happen, because we have people willing to have this change happening within the organizations.
Can I just comment on your point about you said two things, Paolo,
Yeah.
that kind of caught my attention and imagination to talk about the cultural side at the end. You mentioned you need like a disaster essentially to move the needle. First kind of thought is when that disaster or series of disasters happen, it's too late. Because at that point, there are some system changes which you can't really revert in the planet. And then on your point about culture, I think it's we need to get to a point. So we talk a lot about the science and the numbers and the 51 billion tons and all the rest, and we are probably the first ones guilty to talk about the mechanics of this. But the only thing that really will move decision makers, all of us, is if we kind of believe and we culturally feel that we need to do something about this. It's like so today I think it's unthinkable that you would go to to imagine that someone could go to a company, to a board level and say, hey, I think we should do something to eradicate child labor from our supply chain. And people reacting saying, bring me a business case, I'm not sure if it's a priority. That's like, feels wrong, right? Everything is going like your senses are going off. We need the same reaction for climate. You go into a C-level conversation and say, we need to reduce our carbon emissions using innovation. That's the only way. We don't want to hear, bring me a business case back in 2 months' time. We want to hear, of course, we have to do it. I think we will get there. We are getting there. It's also like a generational thing. I see, my kids, they talk about climate change at school. Our generation probably something we know, but was not taught to us. And previous generations probably is something out of their reach. So I think it's also a generational thing, but it will be second nature at some point. It will be just, and of course, we have to do something about it.
And what about the role of institutions and public authorities? You mentioned before, Chloe, before three actors, so the individuals, institution, and businesses. So how do you foresee regulations or policies evolving to support the adoption of sustainable digital practices? And also, what role should governments play in driving this transition, basically?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to bring in regulations. I mean, I think someone mentioned the CSRD, which is starting to regulate a much larger group of companies. And that's going to be really great because that business case is not going to be asked anymore. You just have to do it as part of the process. So I would say governments and regulatory bodies need to start bringing in things that consider digital, especially as we are starting to digitize a lot of things. I think they have a huge pressure or they have huge power to ensure that climate change isn't considered as a business financial concern. It's just done and considered. And I think that's really important. And I also think consumers themselves have power to, with their money, with their vote, to, if you want something to be sustainable, you can vote for that or you put your money towards it. So I think consumers can also, us as individuals, have great power in making change. Yeah, I don't know whether anyone's got anything else to add.
Yeah, Chloe, I have something to add to what you said because
Mhm.
we always see ourselves as just consumer, but we're also investors. So where we put our pension funds, where we put our savings is very relevant too. Indeed, for example, right now, all my savings, all my investments are in green startups or in the green field, and that is even much stronger because as a person, if I work very hard, I can reduce my emissions by 1 or 2 tons per year if I work very, very hard. But as an investor, for example, invest in a startup that is able to reduce millions of tons per year, I can have a huge impact. So we should consider ourselves also as green investors. So also where we put our personal savings is relevant too. And I want to highlight that because it's I think that is where we have the real power, because where we put the money is where the innovation will go, and we can definitely speed up technologies like the one I showed you. I'm investing in those companies because I know that each of those companies have plans to save millions of tons of CO2 in the next 5 years. So by just putting some money there, I can have a far stronger impact than using than taking the plane once less, even if that is relevant too. But where we
Yeah.
put our savings is like super powerful.
So you see
Yeah.
consumers as possible key drivers for the adoption of more sustainable digital practices. I mean, in literature, but also in press, always a lot has been said about the key role of consumer in affecting business choices in terms of sustainable practices. And I'm not talking exclusively about reporting or CSR. Do you think that also education might have a practical role? But really, I mean, probably we are now discussing about this and someone else is doing shopping online because it is faster and more comfortable than going to the supermarket. Okay. What's your perspective in this direction? Do we really can rely on also consumer behavior for having businesses from the B2B part having more sustainable digital practices? Or do we need to start from the B2B side, Paolo, as you was mentioning before, which is something which is very linked into Forest Valley philosophy, the fact that we need to act from the B2B side? Difficult question.
Nice. I mean, on my side, we try to be as practical as possible. So like, if 75% of the problem is on energy, we have to work on energy. If that energy is produced by energy companies, we need to work with energy companies to speed up their things. So my personal perspective was okay. If I have to do something about that, I have to Pareto optimize my efforts and put all my efforts in something that I think has a huge impact. But on the other hand, I mean, it doesn't mean that I mean, education is not relevant or my behavior as a consumer is not relevant. So I can be of an example, or I can vote for of course, like Chloe was talking about voting. Of course, if I vote in a certain direction, I have an impact. On my personal, I mean, my personal view, that was also my view. I mean, as what I was, what I wanted to do as a grown up. Of course, I decided that that my job will have been about this kind of things. And as I was saying to Chloe, as I was saying, answering to Chloe and adding something to hers, I thought, okay, I will put my effort into reducing the climate impact. I will put my money into that. But that's a personal choice. I just thought that was like the best I could do and the most impactful thing I could do. But of course, I mean, it's impossible to invest in technologies that are not there because nobody's adopting them or because nobody is studying on those things. So we need researchers to study on that. We need like education to make people aware of those things, and then be willing to invest in these technologies, adopt these technologies within organizations. So I think like everything is interconnected. As an individual, I decided up for one path. I mean, we cannot force anyone to work on these topics. We cannot force everyone to invest all their money in the climate space. But we can give our example. So I'm trying to give an example, not as a consumer. I mean, I try to be as sustainable as possible as a consumer, but I try to give my example as an investor. So where I put my savings is climate.
Richard, Chloe, would you like to add something in this respect?
So do you want to go first?
I don't have much more to add. Yeah, you go.
I agree with everything that Paolo said. I think, well, every little counts. I think every little counts. So I get the Pareto 75% rather than 80 in this case. The only thing I would say, just to offer like a small counterpoint to that, it could also be an easy excuse to say it's not my problem. you know, if I mean, the people on this call had I would say they have been lucky enough to devote a lot of their time and professional career now to this topic, which is great. But a lot of people do other jobs, and they are important jobs, and they have to continue to do those things. They should find ways to still make a contribution, hopefully, as we keep doing in our private life. So just as a point is, it's not like the oil and gas company's problem or the big tech problem or Silicon Valley problem. I think is our problem. So even taking that one plane less. So I went to Cologne last week by train. It was 6 hours. It was lovely. I was trying to do the same to come to Milan next week, but it's going to be a bit more difficult. So I think I'll take the flight in the end. But, so it's a balance. So you can't always get it right, and no one is perfect. But having that in your mind and trying to do the best thing whenever you can, I think is important, even if it's a small improvement.
I didn't want to say that you have to burn gas to cook your meal, or so I didn't want to. Yeah,
I know.
Okay, so I think we ran out of time. We are a little bit late. First of all, thank you, of course, to our speakers for joining us today, and also to our participants. You will receive an email with the event recording and also the presentation deck that you saw today. Let's follow us, of course, on both 51 to Carbon Zero and Forest Valley on our social media channels and contacts to keep in touch with the next events and also next initiatives. In particular, on Saturday, there will be another event by Forest Valley and 51 to Carbon Zero in Milan, at this time in person. You can register for it in the Milano Digital Week website, so you will meet us. And also follow our calendars on Luma to keep on touch for the next events that we are organizing, discussing hot topics of sustainability and climate transition. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice day or evening from wherever you are. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.